Hola,
Oh, it's
hola.
fantastic to see everybody coming in. I love it.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Mariel. Hi, Madeline.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone, to our first Hope Hour of 2025. The Hope Hours are Hope's virtual continued education opportunity for our alumni, and it's also our opportunity to engage Latinas across the U.S., tell them a little bit about Hope, about the work that we're doing, and continue to foster community. And so I'm excited that you all are here with us today. I'm Diana Maya. I'm the Senior Director of Programs here at Hope. I'm excited to be a part of the team that is putting this initiative together. We will be having Hope Hours monthly every Thursday, every fourth Wednesday of the month. The themes will be different. Some of them will be thematical based on what's happening that month in the calendar, and some of them will be, the majority of them will be kind of skill building opportunities. And so we hope you will join us for the remainder. It's only right that we launch the first one under Women's History Month and that we take the opportunity to just have a pause, take stock, reflect on just our contributions to society, but also to celebrate our growth in leadership and representation across the U.S. and here in our home state of California. I will, in just a second, introduce our moderator. But I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that earlier this year, with support from some of you in the audience, we hosted our biggest Latina History Day conference to date, and here in downtown Los Angeles. And that was really just a remarkable celebration of Latinas and our culture, and also an opportunity, again, to do some more skill building and growth in our careers. The theme for today's conversation is going to be Latina leadership. And so we are going to have that conversation with Helen Torres, our CEO. But before that, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce our moderator. We have invited Hope College Leadership Program alumni Oriana Fuenmayor, who is a 2024 graduate of the Indiana University, Indianapolis, and she's currently a case manager with Hensley Legal Group. She is joining us from the Midwest. She's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, but she is going to moderate a fantastic conversation with Helen, and we'll get to learn from Helen's experience and career building and fostering leadership for Latinas. So with that, I turn it over to Oriana.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. And thank you, Hope, for inviting me to moderate this timely conversation. This is a beautiful way of closing out Women's History Month, with us reflecting on the accomplishments of our community. So to introduce myself, I am Oriana Fuenmayor. I go by she, they pronouns, and I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm an asylum seeker, but I've been living in Indiana for the past 8 years or so. I'm extremely passionate about equity and social justice, and I recently graduated with degrees in political science and global and international studies. And my professional experiences include working in legal services, education, as well as nonprofit organizations. And my long-term goal is to become a public interest attorney, providing legal representation to the people who need it most, and hopefully advocate for transformational change. But now I'd like to welcome Helen Torres, Hope's Chief Executive Officer for the last 24 years. It's only right that we kick off our first Hope Hour of 2025 during Women's History Month with a leader who has helped shape the lives of countless leaders across California and the entire nation. Helen has a background in public affairs and communications and grew up in Michigan. So welcome, Helen.
Thank you so much, and what a pleasure. And thank you for your leadership, Oriana. It's wonderful to be in community with everyone that's on the Zoom, but it's particularly wonderful to be in community with a fellow Midwesterner.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here and grateful. And I'm only able to be a leader and to develop kind of those leadership traits because of Hope, and so many other resources that we as Latinas have started to build for each other. So I'm really grateful for everything that you have done. So I want to kick us off with our first question. And I wanted to ask, can you share with us what has inspired you, a Latina from Michigan, by way of Puerto Rico, to take a leap of faith and raise your hand to lead this organization starting 24 years ago?
I know it's crazy to think, and we have a good friend, Miriam, from ABC7, who's joined us as well. Her and I started our journey, our professional journeys, very similarly. In August of this year, it'll be 25 years. So, for some of the women that are joining us, I have been at Hope longer than you've been alive. So that's a little crazy to think, but it's a lot to celebrate. It all originates. My Genesis story really originates with, like a lot of ours, is our experience in this country. And how I experienced this country was really through the eyes of my mother. She was a single parent. I have an older sister. I was born with a pretty serious heart disease, which my parents knew, or my mother knew, because she was a single parent, that by the age of 12, I would have my first open heart surgery. So she came to this country with an advocate's heart, literally, to advocate for care for myself, for a good education for my sister. She found the system to be very difficult to navigate, a lot of discrimination, not built for a woman that wanted to raise her children, and to give them opportunities without a lot of sacrifice. And she had to sacrifice a lot. So I'm very grateful to my mom. But at the end of the day, she wasn't able to pursue an education that I think would have made the world a difference for her. She wasn't able to pursue higher levels of employment, because she didn't have the ability to go back to school and get the skill sets. And she was, at the end of the day, when we moved out to the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, a very blue collar, beautiful, beautiful place, Westland, Michigan. But, she was discriminated against, made fun of her accent, and little by little, she just retreated more into the safety of our own home, right? So I saw the world really shrink around her. And I just knew that if my mother had the opportunities that were being afforded to me, that she fought so hard for my sister and I to have, she would probably be a world-class architect right now, right? And so because of that experience, I find it that it has been my passion, my mission to ensure that everyone's full potential can be met, that we can remove barriers of discrimination, of lack of resources, so that we could really be our best selves and be in community and helping each other to be our best selves. So that's what motivates me.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I want to say that so many of the things that you said resonate with me. Um, I would say that, and like many, of all the Latinas on this call, like I'm sure that they also relate. I've had so many of those experiences too myself, and I have kind of witnessed my parents also um, witness all of those kind of systemic barriers, but also I think like the individual, like interpersonal aspect of discrimination that you see in your community. And it is so challenging, like when you are a first generation Latina, to see that, and know that the people that came before you have all of the drive, but all of those inequities just kind of drain, right? They are really draining on people's energy, and they limit all of these opportunities. And so I think I would say like that is a big motivation for me as well when I pursued higher education, and now that I'm working and I have plans to go to law school. So much of that for me is also about like, I want to not just uplift my family, but I want to, kind of be a trailblazer and make things easier for the next generation of Latinas. So I love that. And that really, I just relate to that on so many levels.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so special about the Hope community, is that regardless of what our origin story is, we have a commonality of grit and really being lifted up because our parents, often a lot of them, have sacrificed for us. And we continue the sacrifice, right? But we also have that responsibility about paying it forward. And that's what I
Mhm.
think makes Hope so special. It's a space where we can join together and understand where we're all coming from.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so true. I mean, just from my experiences in the college leadership program and when I went to like a young professionals conference or summit, I could very much see that. I could see that diversity in terms of our experiences, but I could definitely see that commonality of the grit. And just the fact that I think all of us as Latinas, like we have to work so much harder to get to the same places and achieve the same things. And so that's already, I think, like a testament to that grit, like you said. Yeah. And then I guess we can now move on to our next question. And my next question is, there's been a lot of significant gains in Latina representation in the California legislature. How have you seen Latina leadership change in California over the last 24 years?
I've been thinking about this question because there's absolutely gains, right? We know that the state Senate now has close to 13 Latinas. If they galvanize together, they can elect the first Latina Senate pro tem. I mean, that's how powerful the group can be if they come together. 7% of the state Senate are Hope Leadership Institute alumni, or gone through our binational program. So we've definitely seen a record number of Latinas being elected in California. We've also seen through the work that Hope does in particular, because we don't do the electioneering piece. We do the training piece, but not the electioneering piece. But what we do really put a lot of effort is ensuring that Latinas are represented on commissions across the state. And so we've also seen an increase there. So we're seeing increases. The question now is, with those increases, how do we use power? How do we leverage power? And to ensure that we don't forget community, because we're based in community, and that we don't question the life experiences, so that when you're in power, you're really bringing not only community, but your life experiences and the representation of community that's so much needed to ensure a representative, strong democracy. And I always want to anchor the work that we do at Hope on that, is that we're part of a larger ecosystem of ensuring and protecting our democracy. And I think that's really important, especially in places like I saw that on the chat, there's a couple of individuals from Texas joining us. If there's anyone from Florida, when you're close to being the majority in a minority majority state, then you have a responsibility to our democracy. And we take that responsibility tremendously as key, right, to our fundamental well-being here. So we've seen increases. Now we have to ensure that the increases continue. We cannot just sit back and say, job accomplished, right? Because every election cycle is a way to reinvent ourselves. It's a way to bring in more leaders. And it's not just an elected office. We need to make sure there's Latinas in foundations. We need to make sure there's Latinas in corporate America. We need to support our entrepreneurs. So what I've been seeing is, yes, we've seen increases in all those areas, but we also need to make sure that the pipeline is strong. So young women like yourself are right on that pipeline. And, the good work that we're doing today is going to probably, hopefully, create a smoother pathway. I don't think that there's always going to be an easy pathway, but a smoother pathway towards our representation and to strengthen our democracy.
Yeah, I love that. I really love the emphasis on democracy. I especially appreciate that as a political science major, and also like I did quite a bit of research on that front, on like democracy and dictatorships, and I mean, and coming from Venezuela and having so much of that kind of firsthand experience of like what does it look like when people are trying to weaken democratic institutions. So I agree with you. I think it's so important that we kind of recognize that kind of our collective struggle, right, to rise to these leadership positions is also kind of also goes hand in hand with this kind of larger movement. I think like for people from the Latino community and from other communities of color and any kind of population that has been historically and contemporarily like marginalized. And so yeah, it's so important that we kind of recognize that larger responsibility that we have to the rest of the to the rest of our community and to the country. Like you said, I especially like that you talked about, like in addition to representation, that sort of like how do all of these Latinas, right, on these commissions and in government, like kind of come together, right? That aspect of like coalition building, right? Like now that we're here, we have to leverage that we're the majority to try and, and push for things that we know are going to benefit the community, and using those life experiences because they definitely make a difference. And I also just wanted to say, like, I think that talk about just commissions and local governments and foundations, it just I find that to be really important because I think, in general, so much of the focus when we think about government and making change is, let's say, on the presidency and on federal agencies, and they are obviously like an important, portion of that. But local government and state government also like play such a huge role in shaping like our day-to-day lives. And so, yeah, I love that you're really kind of taking that step of like also pushing for Latino leadership, supporting Latinas to get into these positions in all of these other places that people don't traditionally think about. So even just like the boards of like nonprofits and just like public transport agencies. And so I really like that. And I think it's just such a great approach to this sort of like, to building power in our community. So
Thank you. Yeah, I want everyone to think for a moment of how they're showing up in their personal, professional lives as leaders, and really give yourself a pat in the back because we're leaders within our families. I know, especially if you're first generation like I was, your family depends on you a lot. And so that leadership shines through. If you're in a work professional experience, it doesn't matter what the title is. You can show up as a leader. You can give your opinions. You can navigate the system to ensure that you're creating a space for everyone to be rewarded and to be acknowledged. So I think leadership is a very interesting perspective to have. If you're always waiting for someone else to step up to be the leader, then perhaps you should really take some introspection, and think about how you're showing up as a leader,
yeah,
which
absolutely.
obviously
And
you are
yeah,
doing, which I love. Thank you for your leadership.
no, thank you. And I wanted to add, like, I think it's also important for everyone to remember, like, you know so much more than you think you know, right? I think we really underestimate ourselves and we underestimate like how powerful our lived experiences are. Like we don't think of ourselves as like having all this expertise on the things that we
Right.
experience day to day, right? We think of expertise as like linked to specific degrees or like a specific title, but it's like if you've been through these different things, right? If you've experienced all of these systems and all of these institutions just as a community member, like that is valuable and that is something that you bring to the table. So
Absolutely, 100%.
yeah, thank you. Let's see. We can move on to our next question. Let's see. What do you believe needs to happen in order for more Latinas to take on positions of power and influence in industries like business and tech, in addition to politics?
Well, we have to be very honest. A lot of what's happening in our world is really geared to individuals that have an education. So we have to ensure that pathways into higher education to specialty careers are pathways that are open to our community, that we're not barred from them, and that we take the responsibility of leveraging those opportunities. This is another place for leadership to shine. If we are not talking to our families about the realities of how AI is going to change the world, especially our workforce, if we're not listening to and reading about what education we are going to need, what degrees we're going to need, what kind of professions, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. So first, I think it's critically important that we align ourselves with educating ourselves with what the future demand's going to be. And then I'm going to put a caveat there. The other caveat is do not tie yourself so much that you can't have the flexibility to follow your passion. I didn't go to college to be an executive director or a CEO of a nonprofit. I had no clue. I didn't even know that was an opportunity to exist. But I did go to college with a communications and urban studies degree, and I was very curious. And I look back, I loved studying people. I loved understanding what motivated individuals, and I had such a passion for our political system. So everything I did prepared me to be a critical thinker in that realm, which then helps me in the work that I do today. So you have to have curiosity. You have to know yourself or be in a journey to get to know yourself. And we have to ensure that we're preparing our communities and ourselves. I'm 56 years old, and I say that with a lot of pride. I don't ever say, oh, I look 21 or anything. No, I'm 56, and I literally have the heart scars to show it. And I'm very proud of that. And I have the pregnancy scars to show from my pregnancy. Every scar I have own, I just celebrate. And the reason I'm bringing up my age is that there will be a time, probably in the next couple of years, that I have to go and educate myself about AI. And really, probably right now, actually. So just remember that education's constant. And what the future's going to look like, we've got to be on top of it. And the other thing is, we need to be defining the future. There is such a spirit of entrepreneurship among Latinas. Um, and there's an opportunity to invest in each other that we can then run our own companies, create our own jobs. In California alone, Latinas create over 100,000 jobs through their small businesses. Just imagine if we were to help them go from a micro business, quite frankly, to a small business, we could probably double employment in California to 100,000 to 200,000 just with investing in our women. So we need to invest in our education. We need to invest in our entrepreneurship. We've got to be smart and have tough discussions about where we're going as a community and how we're valuing and really being smart of what the future looks like.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think thinking about the future, it is so important because it is changing so much the policies and AI, and there are so many things that are going to make just when you think about the labor market or when we think about nonprofit organizations, like, things are going to be drastically different just in a couple of decades, I think, for all of us. And I like what you said about education and how important it is in that regard. Because if just to draw from an observation that I made recently, it's like my parents, we came from Venezuela, like seeking asylum, and they're working in normal kind of hourly warehouse jobs, and even though they have engineering degrees. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think maybe when they went to college, they would have thought, oh, this is like a very transferable degree, right? This is like a safe bet. But, when my father goes on to try to seek those kind of jobs as an engineer, there are new softwares now that he doesn't know how to use. And it's like, so now his skills are outdated and his credentials are outdated, which has made it really, really difficult for him to kind of overcome that and to seek alternative forms of employment. But I think that just makes me think about, like, oh, okay, well, now my younger brother also wants to be an engineer, and I have to, let him know, like, hey, like, like, make sure that you are strategic about, like, continuing to educate yourself in the near future, because there's all these things happening. And I think that happens for all professions, right? Like, up until recently, I worked at another law firm where, like, the main partner, like, struggled to use Microsoft Word. And so, but that's what the paralegals were for. But she was
Right.
lucky in the sense that she owned it. But if she had to move to another country and restart all over, what would happen then? And so, I think in that sense, yeah, it is so important in order for us to just continue to be able to take on these positions and navigate these changes that are going to come to different industries and whatnot. And I also really want to like agree with what you said about entrepreneurship, because I think we see that so much in not just like first generation like Latinas, but in all generations of them. I see
Right.
on LinkedIn always all these Latinas like opening these businesses of like, I'm gonna coach people into public speaking, or I'm gonna coach other Latinas to attain higher salaries and whatnot. And so I think it's so important that we kind of continue to cultivate that, and we support other Latinas that want to do that. And in order to support them, right, it really helps to have other Latinas be in things like chambers of commerce, or being like different agencies that can kind of provide those resources and those kinds of different tools that'll help people kind of get in that lane. So yeah.
No, absolutely. I think we have to, I'm looking at some of the comments, and a couple of the women that had commented said, they went to school for like criminal justice and ended up in finance. Or, you go for political science and you end up running a nonprofit. Um, you have to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Education is continuous. You have to look for those opportunities that you learn from individuals in the job too. So there's the formal education where you can get your certificates and your degrees, and then there is the informal education that you can get from just doing. But if we don't
Mm-hmm.
speak up, if we don't put ourselves in those opportunities, if we don't raise our hand to volunteer for an assignment that perhaps no one else wants to do, and it's learning new software, then you're going to be left behind, unfortunately. What I don't want that for our women. I don't want that for anyone. I want us all to be, once again, fulfilling our full potential. And yes, that means being happy and not just going with a trend or just following money, but really truly understanding that educating yourself, providing opportunities for others, and really not being left behind. It's really a lot of it is under our control. There are things that aren't, and that's why it's so important to have organizations like Hope and others that advocate to remove those barriers and to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Um, let's see. I want to be. I want to make sure that we're kind of good on time. So we're going to move on to another question, which is, how have changes in societal attitudes towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we've seen a lot of that lately, how has that impacted Latina women's like advancement in leadership, or how do you see that kind of impacting it in the coming months?
It, I think that's the question of the hour. It really is. And I'm struggling with it. I shared with some of my team members here at Hope that I'm losing sleep over that question. Because we are at a serious crossroads of really discussing our place in in this democracy, and for ensuring that our voices and our experiences and our dreams will not be forgotten or not valued. So we have to value ourselves first. We have to ensure that we're keeping up to the all the intelligence of what is occurring currently. If it's just this change in language, we've seen that before. Yeah, I've been in this, role for a very long time. What used to be DEI used to be social responsibility, what used to be affirmative action. It's had a lot of different names. What we need to really evaluate is the action that's being taken. And we need to hold ourselves and others accountable to ensure that no one is being discriminated against, that no one is being left behind, and that we all can come together and say, oh, Latinas make 20% of the population here in California. How can we not invest in them? Not only is it morally right, but is the responsibility of a democracy to ensure that all residents of the democracy are taken care of. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think I'm just sharing a lot that's going through my mind right now. Because this is in a place where we need to listen, but not acquiesce. We need to really pay attention to see what the actions are. And, what I'm doing for Hope is I'm coming up with almost three different scenarios of how the organization is going to flourish regardless. So if it's DEI or attack on equality or equity, at the end of the day, we just got to make sure that no one's being discriminated against and that we're providing opportunities for everyone. And that is an imperative that we cannot negotiate on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But no, I think you did answer it because I do agree that regardless of what we call it, DEI, you know, the diversity, equity, accessibility, and whatever else they want to put on it. It really is at the end of the day about discrimination, about equal access to these opportunities for us to uplift our families, to uplift our communities. And I especially like the observation that you made about, like this is the very, very significant percentage of the population of California that Latinas represent. And so I think like when we come out with that kind of information with these numbers, it's like this isn't something that you can just deny, right? Like this isn't information that you can dispute. We are here. These are the contributions that we are making, and all of those contributions merit, those protections against discrimination, and they merit increasing that access to opportunity. So thank you. And then finally, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the Latina leadership agreements that you developed a few years ago. I believe they were shared with the audience. And so I specifically wanted to touch on agreements number 8 and number 9. Number 8 says
Those are
value
mine. I love
democracy.
it. Those are the ones I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on too. So we were thinking alike. Perfect.
Awesome, perfect. But yeah, number 8 says value democracy and advocate for the voices, which touch I think a little bit on. And then number 9 is embrace grace and second chances while holding to a higher standard. So do you want to just tell us about what inspired those two specifically, or just tell me all about those two?
Absolutely. So just for some foundation, we as an organization, we're really struggling with how do we hold each other accountable? When we talk about Latina leadership, we don't want to prescribe what a Latina leader is because we all have different versions of what that may be. But where we landed and where I really spent some time, and maybe some of you are very familiar with Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. That was really a fundamental read for me as a young person. And the first agreements of the Latina leadership agreements are really based on that. So then I started looking inward and looking at Hope's vision and mission. And democracy is at the core of it, right? And so that's how number 8 really evolved. Was everything that we do at Hope has a civic engagement lens. Everything that we do, it's about stepping up in leadership and ensuring and protecting our democracy and being the strongest advocates that we can be for ourselves, for our community, for our families. And oftentimes, because of the uniqueness of our Latino community, and sometimes not so unique experience, that means that we're advocates for individuals that are here with us, from children to undocumented individuals that don't have a vote and are often feeling like they're voiceless. And so oftentimes we take on that role of the advocate to ensure that they don't feel that way and that they can have a voice in the system. So that's really what's behind the value of democracy and advocating for the voiceless. As leaders, we have to ensure that everyone, we don't want to be treated how sometimes we've been treated, right? We don't want to discriminate as others have discriminated against us. So I love reading that. We uphold the principles of democracy, recognizing the importance of civic engagement and the right to vote. Now there's something to fight for, right? The right to vote. We commit to speaking up for those who do not have a voice or a vote, advocating for equity and justice. And I think everyone can really get behind that. And that's what I love about really crafting the value of democracy. And number 8. Now, number 9 came from a very difficult experience that the Latino community was facing here in Los Angeles when one of our very own was caught on tape saying very racist, discriminatory slurs. This is a fellow Latina, someone that I admired, someone that has been part of Hope. And we never, once you're part of Hope, you're always a part of Hope. Um, but there was definitely a fall from grace. And a lot of our leaders have. We often think that leaders need to be superhero, and that just doesn't make sense. We're all human beings. So number 9 came really from this inspection, if you will, of what does it mean when you're not at your 100%? What does it mean when you make a mistake? So how do we embrace grace and provide second chances while still holding for a higher standard? So one is recognizing that we're all human. 2 is that, we believe in the power of second chances. People can rewrite their story. You're not part of a script that cannot be rewritten. And that we do have to hold each other to higher standards, but forgiveness and resilience is part of those higher standards. So that's really the background on number 8 and 9. I think they're my 2 favorites because they really speak to who I am as an individual and who I'm striving to be as an individual.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. No, I really love this too. I really think that number 8, like you said, is something that we can all get behind, right? Because these are, I think, basic principles of our country or how we would like our country to be. And especially, I think when as an asylum seeker, right? As someone who has been in this country for so many years and who graduated here and who has worked here and just being here has shaped so much of my just so much of who I am, but I don't get to vote and I don't get to kind of like in that sense participate in that decision making that happens when we have local, state, and national elections. Like I do think that it is so important for people for all the Latinas who can't vote to recognize kind of the power that they have in that sense and to be able to wield it and to advocate for those of us who don't feel like we have as much of a voice that we can use. And number 9, I also really appreciate in my previous role, I was doing a lot of work with restorative justice and violence prevention. And there was a quote that I saw when I went to a conference, and I think I have it somewhere in, just in my things in like a little like token that I have. But I think it says something like, to build a world of accountability, we must believe in redemption. And so I really, yeah, I'm somebody who, I've worked with people who have been, justice involved, people who have been formerly incarcerated, and I've worked with undocumented immigrants. And it's just so, I think it's so important. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, that we need to be able to think about that, right? And I think like it's so hard. I think for some people it's hard to be like, okay, like, like this person did something and I don't want to associate myself with that. But also, how do we individually and also as a collective hold that space for people to be better and to improve themselves and to hold themselves accountable, right? And so I just like I really love I really love agreement, number 9, because I think it's something that as a culture we definitely need to foster more amongst ourselves and also within ourselves. So
Absolutely. To me, number 9 really is about the value of being human and the value that we can subscribe to each other as human beings and seeing each other as human beings. oftentimes in the, the academic world, there's that conversation around othering, right? When you other someone, when you dehumanize them, it's a very easy process to fall into. And the value of number nine about giving grace and having second chances. First of all, I would challenge everyone to do it for themselves. Give yourself grace. Make sure that you're positioning yourself for a second chance too, because sometimes I think we're the hardest on ourselves. Um, but then that we can also extend that, because what it allows us to do is really be in community and allows us to value life and what it means to be a human being. When you don't value that, I think that's when we get into othering each other and creating space that is not productive.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And let's see, I don't believe that we have any questions for, oh, never mind, we do have one question. So let's see. I think Fabiola in the comments said, like, hi, Helen, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. After 20 years in corporate, often as the only Latina in the room, I took a step back to reflect on how I can give back. I want to help first generation Latinas navigate corporate spaces by sharing lessons I've learned. So, what advice do you have on getting started and making a broader impact in an effective way?
Yeah, I think always volunteering with great nonprofits is a fantastic way to do that. And finding the nonprofits that are aligned with your values and with the audience that you want to make an impact with. So, the Girl Scouts is a great place to do that. If you're in the Fresno, well, youth leadership programs are throughout Girls Inc. So I think it's really finding that alignment with a nonprofit that is targeting their audience is young Latinas or young women, and making sure that they're aware of who you are and the opportunities that you can bring to the table. Now, also volunteering at various community colleges. I think there's so much an opportunity to help our community colleges system or students to not only navigate the system to go either into a four-year institution or to figure out a career path. Um, and not enough of us are doing that. I know that's something once I retire, that's going to be probably a place that I'll concentrate on. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there. It's just asking the questions of your local community college and looking at some of your local nonprofits.
Yes, I think as somebody who recently transitioned out of the nonprofit field, I think nonprofits are a big one. And I can tell you, as somebody who worked in like a kind of individual contributor coordinator role, I really would have appreciated having Latinas on our board of directors, because there was one, but she was kind of new. But it's like somebody, a Latina, who would be heavily involved in kind of steering and just ensuring that kind of accountability for the organization. I would have really appreciated that, and I'm sure that other Latinas in the sector would also love that. Let's see, we have some other questions. Um, let's see. Sylvia said, "Where are the opportunities to help as we pivot and continue growing progress forward in this current climate?" And Sylvia, I presume that you mean kind of in this climate of like hostility and backlash, right, towards the EI. So how can we pivot and kind of continue to move forward?
I think there's a couple of things. First of all, we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because there's a lot coming, happening all at once. I always suggest people to find the lane that they want to really carry find a lane where you want to ensure everyone's okay. So if it's education, are you working with education leaders and advocates around this time? Don't feel like you have to do it all and that you have to respond to everything. So find what your passion is, find your lane, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and there's three key ways. One, start donating to the causes that are important to you. Donate to the candidates and the organizations that you think are going to make a difference, and start volunteering with them. Those are the three ways, that are just going to be critical at this time to ensure what you valued is being protected. And then be in community. Diana opened up with saying that we just had our largest Latina History Day conference to point just a few weeks ago. And one of the key things I kept on hearing from individuals coming up and introducing themselves, which I just love, was I really needed this. I really needed to be in community. So, community is a place where we can show up and contribute, but it's also a place that when we show up and we create, we get replenished. So I hope those are
Yeah,
helpful.
I think they are because I think you gave really concrete, options to take action that are gonna have a direct impact. And I really appreciate you talking about taking care of ourselves and about community because I think like sometimes reading all about, the backlash and the things that we're facing, you can feel very isolated, just kind of seeing it all over social media and just not being able to have a conversation about it with another person or to just take your mind off of things. And I think also like when we think about Latino culture, and maybe that's a whole other hope hour, but just talking about self-care and how there isn't as much of an emphasis on that. So it is important that we kind of take that step towards that. So thank you for sharing those things, Helen. And then our last question, Liliana said, when I first started in leadership and representation, there were some Latinos who didn't accept me at first. And how can I move past that? Because at first I got really discouraged and realized that it didn't matter, but it's still something that I fear in the future in bigger leadership roles.
Well, it's a journey. Um, the Latino community is not a monolith. We all look very different. Um, Even in my own family, I look very different than my sister and I, so and we talk differently, right? I have a sister who was born and raised in Philadelphia, and so she has a very different Puerto Rican accent and experience than I do. So what does acceptance look like? I always think it starts first with you. How are you accepting of others? Try to show that example. Obviously, Lillian, I think you always are accepting, so I'm not calling you out, but I think there's a lot of self-awareness that has to happen. And then it's creating a community that's going to help you through those hard times when people that you expect to be there for you or your coworkers aren't accepting of you, that you have a community that you can go back to, brainstorm with, communicate with, and come back with a plan. Because this is going to happen in all our lives at different times. And if you don't have, in the professional corporate world, they often called it your kitchen cabinet. And you also need your kitchen cabinet if you're doing political or volunteer or, are in the civic engagement space. This kitchen cabinet is going to be made up of some friends that know you really well and have a history with you, but also individuals that are more like a mentor and can see a different perspective and give you different advice. And you always need that one friend or that one person, maybe they're not a friend, who's going to say, you're freaking crazy. You need to get out of your own way. And really kind of give you a different perspective. So don't expect that everyone's going to accept you. I know this is a hard thing for me because I'm one of those people that are such a people pleaser and I want to be liked. And this is the thing that I have my kitchen cabinet help me with, right? It's like, move along, Helen, get to the goal. So I think hopefully that's some helpful advice. But having a community in which you can lean on and talk to and get some good advice from is really important. At the end of the day, are you happy? Are you okay? And don't let anyone ever steal your happiness because you're giving up power to that person. So don't let that happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Helen.
Helen. Oh, sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say thank you, Helen, and thank you all. I might have to leave, in a couple of minutes before we finish, but thank you, Helen, for the great conversation, and I hope that
Thank
everyone got some
you.
things. Yeah, of
Just
course.
know we're rooting for all of you, everyone on this website. I mean, I'm so old, Zoom. We're rooting for you. We know you're going to do fantastic things in Indiana, and we know, we have to create these opportunities of space to be in community and of support. And I'm just so in awe of all your leadership. Thank you so much for giving us of this hour with us.
No, absolutely. Thank you all for having me. Everyone, please take care in these, uncertain times. And I'm just gonna pass it back to Diana to close us out. So
Thank you, Oriana. And thank you, Helen, for acquiescing to being our first featured speaker of the Hope Hour for 2025. And I did want to publicly say congratulations on your leadership award from the James Irvine Foundation.
Oh, thank you.
You are the perfect person to kick off our Hope Hour and to have a conversation about what Latina leadership looks like in California and in the US. I did want to, so thanks, Helen. Everybody, thanks, Helen. I wanted to just do a couple of quick announcements before we let you all go. And then we are going to play a video to close us out. But the next Hope Hour will be on April 23rd. Follow us on our social medias accounts at Hope Latina on Twitter, Instagram, and other stuff. And the next theme will be announced in the near future. But with that, I'm going to queue up our programs team to help us play this amazing video that kind of further tells the story of Helen and Hope and the impact that she's had. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us this lunch hour.
It has no sound.
Our mission is economic and political parity for Latinas. So our goal. I appreciate everyone coming from San Diego all the way up from San Jose, Fresno, we have Bakersfield. We love you all. We as Latinas make up 20% of the population in California. We need to ensure we have economic policy that raises up the Latina community. Are you with me? Our mission is economic and political parity for Latinas. So our goal at Hope is to ensure that we're always at the table.
Everything that Hope does has a civic engagement lens to it, from leadership development to an advocacy agenda to doing our own original research. And after 26 years, we have over 2,000 alumni. That's inclusive of our youth, our college, our leadership institute, and our binational fellowship.
Hope is the first and the only statewide institute in California focused on investing in Latinas to become stronger leaders.
I became involved with Hope over 20 years ago. I was a young lawyer. I was maybe 4 years in, thinking maybe I would get into the lobbying world, but Hope really opened up my eyes as to dream even bigger. Well, it's that at $30,000, when I was 8 years old, I was placed in foster care. and I aged out of the foster care system. So I didn't necessarily have parents as a safety net, parents to help guide me. Hope helped me learn about the systems that are in place to be able to navigate those systems.
That request for reconsideration is denied. Do you want to bail review?
This is why this group is really important, because we'll learn the formal, and then there's the what? Informal. So what kind of politics did you have to do? Who did you have to call?
What is different about Hope is its commitment to not only Latina leaders, but the issues that affect and impact Latino communities.
Latina-owned businesses are the fastest growing segment of small businesses in the United States. But there's not enough capital being invested in Latina businesses. There's also a huge Latina wage pay gap. In a city like Los Angeles, Latinas make 34 cents to the dollar of a white male counterpart. And so we try to address that through our work.
This current report serves as a call to action for all policymakers.
Our Latinas are ready to take charge.
To support inclusive entrepreneurship.
They are in local communities ensuring that Latinas are at every table of decision making.
Today, Latinas face immense inequality.
Over time, we give back to Hope, and we ensure that Hope continues to invest in other women.
We just keep expanding and growing and train the next generation.
Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you at the next Hope Hour.